Hello and welcome to the Focal Events Dirty Reiver Diaries. Your hosts today are Brian Singleton and Neil Atkinson.
Well, Brian, we're back onto another podcast. How are you doing?
Very good, mate. Very good. Did you see the cycling at the weekend?
Oh, did I? How good was that?
Yeah, brilliant. It was just, so good to see gravel taking pride of place in the pro peloton, and what an exciting race it was, both men's and women's.
Both of them were just, Pogacar to start off with, he was just outstanding. To be able to put a performance in at 81k to go in those conditions was stunning. On gravel as well, which is always going to be our preference anyway.
Yeah, so if anybody listening hasn't seen any of Strade Bianche from this last weekend, go back and check it on the replays. It'll certainly get you fired up for the Dirty Reiver, that's for sure.
It certainly will.
Yeah.
Anyway, Dirty Reiver, Brian. Let's talk about the Dirty Reiver. That's what we're here for. This year we're en route, the 200 kilometre route, 130 route, 65 route. What's new along the trails and on the routes this year?
A couple of course changes on the 200k, just to keep it nice and fresh. Looking forward to that. We've got some super fast trails out there. It is really running very, very quick. We've got a new feed station location for feed station 2.
Awesome. Well, let me give you a quick overview of what's happening at the event village. We've got some new brands coming on this year. We've got Camelback, we've got Le Col, we've got Joe's No Flats, Sella San Marco, and we're also going to have a small expo village next to the site as well.
So that's going to give some added excitement at the event village and plenty to look at, Neil.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's going to be a really good buzz this year around there. And simply because we've got so many more brands coming, we're going to be opening at 10 o'clock in the morning on the Friday.
Okay, so a little bit earlier. And anything else running on through the day for people to come and enjoy?
Yeah, there's social rides. There's so much stuff going on about during the day.
Brilliant. That's sounding great. So let's move on and get ready for our next guest. Well, Neil, I've been really looking forward to this podcast. This is a fantastic chance for us to chat everything to do with tyres, and want to welcome to the podcast Jeff Zell, the global go-to guy for Panaracer. Jeff, welcome to this episode of the Panaracer Dirty Reiver Diaries.
Thanks, guys. I'm really happy to be here. Appreciate you having me.
So, Jeff, just by way of a little bit of background, how long have you been in the cycling industry? I mean, you're synonymous with Panaracer, but cycling industry generally, what's your background?
I've been in the industry over 30 years. I got back into it back in just before the real boom within mountain biking back in the late 80s, 1980s. So it's been a while.
And then, so you must have seen some pretty significant changes. What would you say are the standouts for you? Just sort of within the industry generally. I mean, I look back and think that, disc brakes, that definitely was a game changer. For you, what do you think?
I think that it was the constant evolution of technology within each category of cycling, whether it was mountain biking back at the time that I started, road cycling with the addition of gearing and a lot of the different aero and riding style technologies. Even things like single speed, city biking, urban biking, the continual evolution within road and mountain biking. And of course, now we're looking at gravel and what all of that is morphing into also.
Yeah, that's quite a history, isn't it?
It really is. And I think that most recently, the most significant advancement would be around electronic shifting, internal routing, things that are making it, I guess, more vexing, but also better in a lot of ways for riders of all abilities as the technology gets kicked down from the very top, to the general rider where it's much more affordable. That's one of the great things about cycling is it does no pun intended really, but cycle through the entire ecosystem of cyclists and cycling.
I like your pun there about recycling it all that. We won't go into that though, but a good one. For me, I mean, yeah, we talk about mountain biking back in the day and coming downhill on a rigid bike with rim brakes on, and to be able to do what we can do now on bikes, it's such a difference.
I think of going to things like, or events like the Mammoth Kamikaze in Mammoth Mountain in the Sierras here in California, and watching these guys go 60 miles an hour down on these rigid bikes down this mountain, just hurtling themselves down the Kamikaze to some spectacular crashes that I'm sure still garner tons of YouTube views when people that are interested in those days go back and look at that. I mean, it's probably similar to what car enthusiasts and race enthusiasts look at in cars back in the day when you could really push the limits of car technology back in the 20s or 30s or 40s, and the evolution of that. It's probably very similar in cycling.
Yeah, I think if you were to say to somebody 10, 15 years ago that, you know, in the very near future, you would be descending some of these really gnarly cross-country trails on a drop bar carbon, effectively road bike, some people would be amazed that that could be possible. And I think that's what we're seeing now, like you say, is that technology filtering through into different areas of cycling.
Absolutely. And to not get too far off into that, you know, old-timey talk, but you look at guys like Tomac who were using drop bar mountain bikes back then, which are essentially today's gravel bikes because it was a 2.1 26-inch wheel, you know, at the time, but he was on drop bars. You had guys like Charlie Cunningham as a pioneer here in the United States that was advocating for this. And, you know, it ended up not taking really at that time. But here we are again, full circle, where it's now acceptable, whether it's because of the technology or it's just something that people are now willing to open their minds to. It's kind of maybe both.
Yeah. And so, you know, looking back at your, you know, kind of where you are with your cycling now, having, you know, kind of obviously seen all these different cycling genres come along, you know, are you very much a gravel rider? Is that kind of your thing? Do you kind of tend towards that, or you're still cross-country mountain bike?
You know, I haven't really been an avid mountain biker, at least not as I was when I first got into this, because the sport, I think, morphed away from what it was that I was looking for as a rider. You know, and it's great that the category has maintained the popularity that it has. When things really went full suspension and more trail or downhill focused, and again, you need to talk about what time period this might have been, but I shifted back to both road and then really over to gravel because for me personally, and not necessarily for Panaracer specifically, but for me personally, that was the joy that I got in riding, was being able to go out and not have to really think too much about all of the different things that were on the bike, but just the general cycling experience that still put the same smile on my face as it did when I was a kid.
You must have just got over your childhood now, though, because you must only be 32.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess because I've spent so much time outdoors, I look really old, but thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
You're kind of known as the global go-to guy for Panaracer. So we're kind of huge fans of Panaracer as a brand. I go back and, you know, to my cross-country days, and I remember the, you know, kind of Panaracer cross-country tires. And in fact, I dug out, this'll make you cringe, I dug out a pair of red wall 26-inch Panaracer tires from the back of the shed fairly recently. And I looked at them and thought, hey, you could still ride them if I had a rim that had fit.
Yeah, I would caution you to be very careful with rubber that's that old, but we get this a lot.
Yeah, and it leads on to, you know, something I remember you saying to me not too long ago, is that, you know, Panaracer have been making gravel tires since the very beginning, when people thought that gravel maybe wasn't going to be a thing. So that must have been quite a leap for Panaracer and you to get behind the gravel genre in the very, very, very early days. What was it that made you take that jump, if you like?
I think, again, that goes back to the philosophy that I have and that is within Panaracer about looking for what might be coming next. And I think that if you talk to anybody in any category within the industry, they're going to basically say the same thing. But because of Panaracer's size and our ability to really compete within, especially obviously the bicycle tire marketplace, that we need to look at things differently than our larger competitors. We can't really go head to head with guys like Maxxis or with Continental or Michelin. These companies have very deep pockets with a lot of ability to market their product, directly, and have those kinds of budgets. Panaracer is oftentimes mentioned alongside of these companies because we've developed product that really competes directly with a lot of what's going on with these larger companies. So people tend to believe in many cases that we're the same size or that we have the same resources.
Yeah.
We don't.
Yeah.
Panaracer has their own factory in Japan where we make 95% of the tires that we produce and that are available to you and everybody else. We do nothing but bicycle tires. We don't do car tires. We don't have any divisions that we can really draw extra money from for resources to do this kind of marketing or do the kind of product development that these larger companies might be able to do. We're 100 people strong, and that includes 70 people in the factory. Yeah. So there's 30 people that don't work in the factory, and I'm the only non-Japanese person in the company. I started hearing about gravel from my sources here in the United States back around 2010, 2011. And I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. I hear about a lot of things, and oftentimes it really doesn't mean anything. It might be too local. It doesn't really have a lot of appeal, whatever the criteria is for gauging the information that I'm getting. But gravel kept coming up, and it kept coming up. And I kept talking to the company about it, and we decided to just do it because sometimes you just need to take a chance. And it was really more about a feeling, as unbusinesslike as that sounds. That's really what it evolved from. It was like, let's see where this goes. And you mentioned that, people may not have known what I was talking about. People thought that I was absolutely out of my mind when I started talking to them about gravel. So, yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting path to get to where we are now.
And that then led to what I think is one of the most iconic tires, in the gravel industry, and that's the Gravel King. Why do you think it's been so successful? Is it, what is it that's made the Gravel King such a successful tire? I mean, I'm riding my bike around the UK and I just see Gravel King tire patterns and tire treads all over the place.
And to be honest, Jeff, we can be in the middle of nowhere and Brian can say to me, Neil, there's been 2 Gravel Kings along this way. Look at this.
and to that, I get people sending either through social media or to me directly if they have my information. When they've come across Gravel King tread in the mud or in the dirt, when they've been on rides, it's like, oh, Gravel King's been here. So yeah. I know exactly what it is that you're saying, and I can't say that it fails ever to put a smile on my face. It never fails. And I think that the success goes to the fact that we listened to this group of people that were very adamant about this type of riding and the community that is gravel. And that's a very big aspect that differs from a lot of other communities. I think mountain biking is similar in a lot of ways with its community.
So, Jeff, very quickly, just looking at the Panaracer Gravel King range, could you just give, for those people who are listening in, just a very, very quick rundown of the range?
Sure. Well, the original Gravel King is still in the line, and that's what we refer to generally as the Gravel King Slick. And this was designed back in the early 2010s as the tire that people needed at that time for gravel, because again, it was based on what those tires would fit and what people were willing to do on those bicycle frames that were old road bikes and maybe cross bikes. We hadn't seen the evolution of wider seat and chainstays and the ability to handle wider tires. And so people weren't being as aggressive as they are now. As the category changed and demand became different, we developed the SK, which stands for semi-knob. Really was different than anything else that was out there and was designed specifically with loose, rockier terrain in really terrible conditions. A tire that was going to work in just about anything. If it worked getting you through mud and didn't sink down into some of the clay-based stuff that we have here and that you find in a lot of places in the world, then it was going to do good in really dry conditions. And the SK really hit a nerve with gravel riders at that time as the sport was really taking off. Racing became much more important in the years since we introduced the SK. We introduced then the semi-slick, which we refer to in general as the SS, which had the smoother center tread, which was again in response to what people were looking for. And that was back in 2017, 2018. And of course, now in 2024, we have the next version, which we can talk about now, or we can talk about later if you want to. Which would you like me to do?
We'll come to that in a minute or two. We'll come to that in a minute. So looking at the Dirty Reiver is on very hard pack, very small, usually very small stones, with possibly two distinct lines and sometimes a bit sketchy in between. Out of the tire range, what would be your tire that you'd reach for in that kind of condition?
Out of the tires that I just mentioned, it would be the SK, because this is going to be the best choice for the different terrain that Reiver throws at you. Because you mentioned the gravel, but you haven't mentioned the sharp turns, the quick uphills, things where you really have to transition. And the SK was developed to offer enough bite both in and out of the saddle if you have to make some of those transitions that you might not be used to, where you come around a corner and you go, oh, shit, excuse my language, but I didn't realize I'm now going 10% uphill after I've just been coming down 14%, and a slick isn't going to do it. And a really aggressive knobby's just going to throw me completely off this. So we designed it with that in mind, and Reiver really lets the SK shine through and gives riders the best opportunity to traverse the course as error-free as possible.
And I do agree there, Jeff. And having rode the event quite a few times, as before I put the hat on that I've got on now, I was always on those, and they just worked unbelievably. They really did. And I find them and still find them fantastic. I really do. So sorry, Brian, I interrupted again.
No, that's so that leads us quite nicely into generally pick your brains on some of the considerations around tires. And when I suppose when I'm looking at a tire, I'm kind of thinking in terms of a few things, and you probably be able to kind of articulate and just explain a bit more about these, Jeff. But we talk about tire volume, we talk about tire tread, we talk about, obviously a lot of people talk about weight, and we talk about kind of pressures that we have in tires. Out of all of these things, what would you say are the kind of main consideration?
Not to be a smart aleck here, but all of them, because gravel, more than almost any other type of riding, the tire choices that you make and what you put into the decision to what to ride, from the tire tread design to what it is that you pick for the tire by weight, what you pick for volume or for pressures, has never been debated more in my time within the industry than it is within the gravel families. And it is consistently at the top of every question that we receive in customer service. I weigh this is my bike, this is what I ride, what should my pressure be, which of your tires should I be riding? And there is a general list of questions that I ask people to answer before making any kind of a recommendation. And I think this is true whether you're riding Panaracer or not. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't ride Panaracer, but you might choose something differently. How much do you weigh?
So why?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, before I answer that question,
well, not you specifically, but in
Let's get personal. Let's do it.
Yeah. So why, Jeff, is the gravel community asking that question that's not been asked by other areas of the bike industry? Or
because I think that you're taking what is a rigid framed bicycle into territory that hasn't been done by most of these people unless they were around in the original or close to the original mountain bike days. Yeah. And that was also a time when tire questions came into play. Yeah. That got removed when mountain biking became pretty standard in the sense that most bikes were full suspension. You had a pretty good idea with UST, what it is that you were going to run and what you were comfortable with. Tires didn't become bomb-proof, but they became much less fallible. With gravel, it's the Wild West, so to speak. Yeah. You are being thrown into conditions and terrain that might constantly be changing or changing consistently enough where you're putting demands on the tire that you're eliminating from other categories. You don't have that in road because you're on the road, right? You don't have it in mountain biking anymore because all of that's kind of been ironed out with the way that the mountain bike technology is today.
And I think that's it's a great way of putting that. That the reason why people are asking questions is because they're bothered about it. They want to know rather than just blasting around somewhere or going on Google and finding the answer, because there isn't really an answer. Because we're consistently altering the pressures in our tires depending on where we're going, what the terrain is. And my racing days are over now, and it's a consistent feel of it and an understanding of it. And I think it's great that people are asking about it, because the more they ask, the more they'll understand and the more they'll enjoy the experience when they get out there.
That's exactly right. And when you get your bike dialed in, and I think this is probably true of any type of bike that you're on, but once you get it dialed in and you don't have to think about any part of your bike other than spinning the pedals, that's the joy that we all really continue to look for, that we first felt when we took our training wheels off and were able to fly on our own.
Let's just talk about some of these individual things. What is the impact of tire volume on how a tire rides or feels? What do you say?
Well, if it's too hard, then you're not going to be comfortable on the bike and you're probably going to bounce everywhere, especially in gravel. And conversely, if it's too soft, then you're not going to get the speed that you need when you're coming out of corners, or you have to reduce your speed and you're going to be working too hard against it. And just a couple of PSI, a bar, something like that can really make a difference depending on how attuned the rider is to their bike. And gravel riders as a whole, either if they're not initially attuned to the bike, they become attuned very quickly because these things are very apparent, the setup and the tire setup and those kinds of things. So dialing in that volume, that pressure is critical.
And then looking again at, we obviously get asked a lot about tire weight, overall tire weight. Now, there's probably a bit of a trade-off in there, would you say, Jeff, between tire weight and ultimately the amount of material that there is there to be able to protect that tire from punctures?
Is that just you being very, very nice about it? There's a huge trade-off. Everybody ideally wants a super lightweight, fast tire that'll never puncture. And that's, you're going to find that at the same time that you find, in fact, a unicorn would be riding that tire. Because that tire does not exist. But you still get people that need to understand that they need to decide what's important to them, because you can get a bomb-proof tire, but it's going to be heavy and it's not going to be performance-oriented. Conversely, you can get a very performance-oriented tire that's lightweight and checks off all of those boxes that are really, really important, but it's probably not going to be a tire that's going to last very long, because tire construction is really based around making compromises. And this is not just true of Panaracer, but of any tire manufacturer. has to decide what it is that they're going to go after. And that's why we have different versions of all of our tires within the line, so we can speak to this person. Are you a general rider where you just want to go out and you want to have fun and you're not doing anything too extreme? Then we have the Gravel King series, just the Gravel King, whether that's the Gravel King, the SS, or the SK. Are you going into things and are punctures really important to you? You don't want to have to get off and plug a tire, or you don't want to have sealant spray all over your bike or anything like that. Then we offer the Plus. Of course, anytime you add puncture material or other layers of material to a tire, you increase the weight.
Yeah.
So what's most important to you, the lightest weight or the best protection?
Yeah.
And that's a question that I or anybody else in tires can't answer. That has to be answered specifically by the person as to what's most important to them.
I think there's a celebration going on this year. Jeff, is that right? Is this going to be, is this the 10th year now for the Gravel King?
2024 marks the 10th year of the introduction of the original Gravel King. It's a big milestone for us.
Yeah. And I know you're very, very excited about it. And I know you've been really busy getting the word out, and want to thank you for your time in your busy schedule to fit us in to have a chat. So, Jeff, what can you tell us?
Nothing. Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, see you at Reiver. Everybody go to Reiver. Have a good time.
I want to do a drum roll then as well.
Let me start by saying that even though we haven't introduced a new model in some time, we have quietly updated Gravel King, the current models, since they were introduced to kind of go along with some trends. But this year marks a huge change in the current lineup and in the introduction of a new model and a new range that we're doing within all of the models. This has been under development for almost 3 years now, but two significantly with testing of new technologies and a brand new model that we're introducing that by the time you hear this will be known to the general public, that we're calling X1.
Yes.
And X1 represents all of the culmination really of all of the research, all of the feedback, all of the information that we have gathered and that we have farmed from our testers, from our people within the industry, from riders that we work with, from riders that we talk to at events, as to what is happening and where gravel is going and what kind of tire needs they really have compared to what's out there right now. Before I start talking about the X1, let me talk a little bit about the technology that I mentioned earlier, that we basically offer two different models. We have the standard version and we have a plus version. This year, we're also adding to the entire lineup, no matter which model it is, an R version. And R basically stands for race. This is a revised version of the current models and the new model that have a completely different casing. They have a refined compound that I'll talk about here in just a moment, and are made for those people that I was just talking about, where weight is the primary consideration and durability may not be. This tire is not going to fall apart fast, but it isn't as durable and not meant to be as durable and won't be sold as being as durable as the standard version or the plus version of our tires. But this is in response to what we've heard in feedback from people that want a faster tire. They want something more supple for those riders that are really tuned into their bikes. And I'm very excited about this line because I definitely think that there's a need and a desire for it. So what that means is that we've developed a new compound, not only for the R series, but for the entire group of tires that we call ZSG Gravel. ZSG is an abbreviation for zero slip grip, which is not really all that exciting, but what it does is zero slip grip is a proprietary compound that we've developed a long time ago, but we consistently update for whatever purpose we want to use it for, gravel, road, mountain biking, to work best for that discipline. And it is almost impervious to temperature changes throughout a wide range from just above freezing to just above where you're an idiot to be out on your bike anyway because it's too hot. And that's what you really want in a tire, because rubber changes depending on temperature range. And the colder it is, the harder traditional standard compounds become, which changes the way you feel on the bike and the way the bike handles and how you then ride your bike.
Yeah.
Conversely, if it gets too hot, the tire becomes softer. The compound softens up, it becomes stickier, which is not really something that you need when it's hot out compared to what you might need when it's cooler. And that slows you down, and that changes the way that you ride. ZSG doesn't change. So the ride that you get within that range of temperatures from, just above 0 to 30-ish, close to 40 centigrade is going to be consistent. So you're not thinking about what's going on with my ride. The tire doesn't come into play because we don't want you thinking about the tires when you're riding.
Yes.
We want you talking about tires when you're off your bike, but not when you're on the bike. They should disappear. They should be invisible.
Yeah.
So the ZSG gravel compound is designed to do that. And there's a standard version and then there's an R version. They're slightly different, but they both do the same thing. And they are mated to what the purpose of the individual tire is, whether it's the standard, whether it's the plus, or whether it's the R version.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Additionally, we have developed a new puncture material based on the Pro-Tite material that we were using previously that we're now calling Tough-Tex. Tough-Tex increases the suppleness of the material while not decreasing the puncture resistance of it. A strip of Tough-Tex is 2 times more puncture resistant than a Kevlar belt, which was and has been an industry standard for a long time. And we use Tough-Tex in a variety of ways, but even in the standard version, it covers Gravel King, no matter what the model is, bead to bead.
Yes.
And it adds more in certain areas for the plus versions to give you that extra protection that you're looking for, to give you a little bit more peace of mind when you're out in the really rough stuff on gravel.
So what is Tough-Tex? What is it? Is it you obviously said it was Kevlar and the other ones. Is it a very, or is it top secret? You're not allowed to tell me.
It is secret. It is proprietary, just like ZSG is to Panaracer. It is a nylon based or man-made based material, but it consists of what it is that we do with the weave of that material, with the weave of the nylon, and what it does in the way of making that material supple, and the additives that we use to kind of fill the gaps with that weave so it becomes more puncture resistant while still being able to respond to what people really like about Gravel King, which is the overall ride quality of the tires.
Cool.
Yeah.
It sounds like a bunch of marketing hype, but I'm here to tell you, of course, I do work for Panaracer, so you can take that with a grain of salt if you want, but it's not. This material and everything that we do has really been tested. You're not going to find a puncture-proof tire unless you get a solid tire. But we're really trying to compose a tire that does a lot of things very well without sacrificing that quality and that feel that you get from the overall lineup.
Yeah. You mentioned, Jeff, that there's been quite a significant change in the way that that rims now are made. The thoughts on tire design?
This is one of the most exciting changes that we've made to the whole lineup for 2024, because it has. In the time that we first developed Gravel King, the original Gravel King model was based on an old Mavic rim with a 17 millimeter inner width to it.
Yeah.
That changed almost before we brought the tire out from original production to 19 and then to 21 millimeter. And then, of course, 23, we see 25 now, we see 28, we see even wider inner widths on rims, and we see the popularity of hookless, specifically with a wide variety of hookless rims that are out there. And we worked really hard to get this to mount to a significant majority of rims that we tested with a floor pump. You don't even need a compressor anymore
Right.
in
Wow.
many cases. I can't say that everyone's going to have the same experience. I won't. That would be marketing hype. The reality of it is that more times than not, with a floor pump, and you can't be shy about it, as you can't be with any time you mount a tubeless tire, but it'll go on, and you'll get that pop 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 pop
Yeah.
pretty easily if you give it the old college try, as we say here in the States. So I'm really excited about beadlock. I think it's going to make installation a lot easier for most people, whether you're a shop mechanic down to somebody in their garage, maybe even trying it for their first time. And that, I hope, is going to enhance the overall experience of Gravel King in general too.
And off the wheel by hand. Is there any differences in that with the Panaracer? Is it easier, harder, or what's your thoughts on being able to put a tire on by hand or off?
Traditionally, our tires have not always been easy to get on and off, because even though you have a 700C tire and you have a 700C wheel, the manufacturing process in both the tire and the wheel are not the same.
Yeah.
And even wheel manufacturers have different wall heights with their rims, depending on the model that you're using. And there may be a little bit different manufacturing process, even if the tire and the wheel company are using ETRTO standards. And this is something that no company, no tire company, no rim or wheel company can really compensate for. There's just no way for us to be, all of us, to be able to make all of this compatible with everybody else's wheels, unless the industry would come together on a wheel tire standard, which is never going to happen. At least I don't think it will happen in my lifetime.
Yeah.
So we do our best. We all do our best, not just Panaracer, but we all do our best to figure out what, not even a happy medium, but what the majority of is really going to be there. So I think that with the new beadlock material, because it does come down to the bead. In the past, we erred on the side of tightness for security and stability, but this frustrated a lot of people. They did have trouble both getting some of the tires on and some of them getting the tires off, depending on what wheel or rim they were using with our tires. This won't.
We're seeing new bead technology, we're seeing new puncture protection technology, and we're seeing a new compound working over a greater temperature range. Any change in tread, Jeff? Anything that we will sort of see when we look at the tire front on?
Well, other than the new model, the tread designs remain the same. They just all received the updated technology. We are also going with new branding, so people can easily see what's new going from 2024 forward, and what we did in 2023 and before that, in the new logo, in the new packaging, and of course, just the new information that's out there with the new technologies. But there is, again, the first new model since the Gravel King semi-slick, that we are calling the X1, and that is a whole new tread design.
Yeah.
And that's been based on many different testing processes, which included making 6 different molds to come to this final mold design. And taking all of the feedback that we've received in what needed to be done to really meet the demands of the gravel rider in 2024 and beyond. And that doesn't mean we've stopped developing, but this is where we find ourselves right now, is with treads that are going to be fast, but also able to handle a lot of the things that people are taking their bikes out now on gravel, because bike technology has changed. As I mentioned earlier in this talk, we now see much greater acceptance for wider tires within bike manufacturing specifications.
Yeah.
To the point where you can even get 700 by 55 C tires in a lot of gravel bikes now. We see the industry at the moment settled on a common size of around 40C for what most people feel is the right width for them. A 40C back in the beginning of this whole journey with Gravel King, people couldn't even fathom it. You would mention wider sizes, and they're like, "That's great, but that's my mountain bike with. I
Yeah.
don't have a gravel bike that can do that. But now that's, almost not too narrow, but it's considered just the, kind of the right size.
Yeah.
And so we've changed our sizing to kind of follow what it is that we're seeing. We've discontinued some of the sizes that we did, like 32s and 38s and 43s, in favor of a much, I think, more acceptable sizing range of 30, 35, 40, 45, and 50 in certain models. And we're looking at even going up to, beyond 50 in a couple of the different models. And the tire tread, then, what people are looking for as they get wider is something that's going to be more aggressive but fast. And that's really what the X1 is.
Right.
The X1 has a completely different tread design than anything that you've seen from us before. It is the result of two or more years of testing. And like I said, 6 different molds. And just real quickly, a mold is what you use to actually make the tire. That goes to great expense. Molds are not cheap, but we were really serious about developing a tire that was going to be fast and aggressive, because those two terms have been mutually exclusive oftentimes. The more tread you have, the slower the tire tends to be, but the design of the X1 is such that it immediately gets up to speed because of the design of the center tread, but offers you really, really great control, both ascending and descending, when you need it in turns, off-camber things, trails that will throw a lot of different things at you, where you need to be able to turn on a dime, accelerate quickly out of turns, and not lose much of your momentum like you might with something that's more aggressive.
Yeah.
Our lab testing, both in our lab and independently, and real world testing from our testers, tell us this is the fastest gravel king. Faster than the SK, faster than the semi-slick, even faster than the standard slick.
Yeah.
And that's really saying something. And that's something that people really have wanted, and I think is going to resonate with the public, when they find out a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So that's the X1.
That's the X1.
So obviously, is there anything else on new tires, Jeff, that we haven't touched on? Anything we need to cover?
I think that we've really covered everything that should be covered at this point, Brian. I went over the technology, went over the new line, went over our thinking, our methodology behind it for those that might still be with us and not onto something else at this point.
One question. Sorry to jump in. I had one question and I left it to the end, and I've wrote it down here. How would you become a go-to guy for Panaracer, the global go-to guy? But I think you've just explained it all without me asking that question. And I think the knowledge that you have to be able to develop such things and to be able to work across all these disciplines, you've just showed your knowledge. And that is why you are the go-to global guy.
Well, thank you very much. That's a really kind way to describe what it is that I do. Just to put a little more context into that, because I'm the only person outside of Japan and work within North America and Europe and in certain other parts of the world so much, that I wore a lot of different hats, and I wear a lot of different hats for the company. So one specific title, which is not something that I'm really huge on, but people oftentimes want some idea of what it is that you really do. And so that just seemed to be kind of the amalgamation of everything that it is that I do.
So just one final one, Jeff, just to wrap up. Obviously, you're looking back over 10 years of, incredible success with the Panaracer Gravel King. If you were to turn 180 and look into the future, is there any things kind of coming on the horizon that you can tell us, or maybe the direction that you think, kind of gravel, or the Panaracer Gravel Kings might go in the next 10 years? What might be on the horizon?
Well, it's difficult to look at 10 years, Brian, but I can tell you that in the next few years, we're watching very closely what's happening within gravel, because this is where the growth in cycling overall is happening. And I don't mean just with what bike companies are doing in putting gravel bikes out, but what resonates with the people that we work most closely with, from consumers all the way up through people within the industry. And that's different segments, or how gravel is branching out from its original roots into more things like adventure, and to what's happening with ultra marathon or distance gravel. Again, these are not really brand new ideas, but the interest and the participation in these things demand different types of technology, not just in tires, but throughout the range of what you would need on a bicycle. And we see this as an area of great interest, because it furthers people's ability to get out
Yep.
on a bike, which is, we're really strong on that,
Yeah.
and is inclusive. That has always been really important to us. Before it was important to the industry, was that, we've got something that can get people out and make them feel comfortable being on a bicycle.
Cool.
Well, it all sounds super exciting, and I hope that, in 10 years' time, we're looking back on another 10 years of success and looking at, kind of the story of the X1 and how that's set the whole world of gravel alight. So, Jeff, it's been a real pleasure, and thank you very much for your time. And yeah, one day we'll see you at Dirty Reiver.
I hope that that's sooner than later. And Brian and Neil, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You're an inspirational guy. You really are. Good to talk to you.
Thanks, Neil.
Neil, that was a great, very, very informative chat there with Jeff.
Yeah.
What would be your takeaways from having heard that then? Bearing in mind the new range of tyres and all the tech talk that there was there.
My takeaway thing from there is that there's a tyre for anybody, whether you're a racing snake and you want a tyre to be able to get round any course as fast as possible, or if you want to invest in a set of tyres that can be used for anything and for many trips, there's a tyre out there for you as well. Which one would I use for the Dirty Reiver this year?
It's got to be the X1 race, hasn't it?
Yes, I mean the trails at the moment are running really fast, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I think I'd go for that one. And then I'd agree with that. But there's so many people out there that may use the tyres for other things as well. So there's something for everyone.
Yeah, I think the X1 would tick the box for me. I like the fact that it is actually showing to be faster than a slick tyre. And I know for a fact, having had my hands on the X1s just recently, that it's, a fairly decent amount of tread on that tyre. And marketing hype or not, I think Jeff hit the nail on the head when he said they are easier to mount, because I mounted a set this weekend. One went on with just my fingers, one I needed to put on with tyre levers, but I was able to blow them up with a standard track pump easily.
Well, I exactly the same as you there, really have. And once they're on the bike now with the tan walls, it looks really nice.
Obviously, we touched on things like pressure and tyre weight and volume. And I guess Jeff had some pretty interesting things to say about that, in terms of, it is fairly individual. Obviously, the heavier weight of a tyre, perhaps isn't quite as quick. So, definitely go for a lighter tyre. But pressure was interesting. That obviously varies by weight of rider.
Terrain as well. It's got to be on terrain as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so that was Jeff Zell, and let's see who we chat to in the next edition of the Panaracer Dirty Reiver Diaries.
Excellent. Happy graveling.
To find out more about the new range of Panaracer Gravel King tyres, go to www.panaracer.co.uk.